Hey everybody, given what's going on right now in the United States and with the reaction to the George Floyd murder, I wanted to spend a few minutes to talk to you about what racism looks like. This is a touchy subject, so please have the patience to stick around till the end of this video so that you and I can learn what we can do to be active agents to fight racism, to change the paradigm shift so that you and I can do something differently and be allies to those who are experiencing racism every single day. First, I want you to follow the logic of we either act or we're acted upon. When it comes to racism, we're either the victims or the people carrying it out or complicit in the racist act being carried out. Why is that? If we stand by and we see somebody victimized and we don't speak up, we don't voice up, we don't do something to prevent it, then we're complicit. So there's no in between. There's no such thing as I'm not a racist. I'm not doing anything. Not doing anything means that we're allowing racist acts to be perpetuated everywhere. In the United States, in Canada. That takes me to point number 2, which is there's racism throughout the entire world. If we go to the Middle East, if we go to China, there's racism going on right now everywhere. And it's not just against people of color or people of a certain creed or people of certain sexual orientation. My focus is looking at Canada, the United States, and the European countries where predominantly we're talking about white middle class, Anglo-Saxon, Protestant, Christian society. So our society here in Canada is based on the institution of the BNA Act, so the British North American Act, where we recognize that there are 2 languages and predominantly the religion is Christian. When we look south of the border in the United States, it's even less accepting of differences. So, where we call it the multicultural paradigm here in Canada, it's called the melting pot there, but it's anything but a melting pot, because what happens is you lose your identity when you become part of the United States. You're either on the in or on the out. And that's where I want to go with this. I want us to talk about what being in and out looks like. What does inclusion look like? So I'm going to share something with you, something called the circle of safety. So hopefully you can all see this. I'm drawing a circle right here, right? And not the best circle, but hopefully you can see it. So this circle here, if we take a look at this circle of safety, where do you feel most secure? The closer that you are to the center, the more safe that you feel. So people who identify as mainstream, these are people who are not ethnic minorities. These are people who are not visible minorities. So for a woman wearing a hijab, or a person of color, or somebody who is brown or black, they are not going to feel very secure because they do not belong close to this circle of safety. Watch my wording here. They don't belong, not because they've chosen not to belong, but we have not built systems and structures and laws that allow them to feel safe where it is most safe, right in the center of the circle. For somebody like me who can pass for somebody, as white until you hear my name, Muhammad, I may start out somewhere here, but then I'm going to shift to somewhere here and maybe even to the outer parameters of the circle. For somebody who is colored, for somebody who is an immigrant, for somebody who doesn't feel like that they belong, for somebody who the society and the community has outed them, they do not allow them to become part of the mainstream community. There are systemic barriers to them being part of the inclusion. They are going not only to be on the outside of the circle, they are going to be outside of the circle altogether. So they are outside the safety circle. What that means is we have laws, we've written laws, we've created systems that have allowed people to identify with what's in the circle of safety. When we continue to write laws, when we continue to expand and become more inclusive, it's always based on the vantage point and the perspective of the people who are the mainstream, because we write the laws. We define what systems look like. We continue to build barriers even when we have good intention and when we're not acting out of malice. We write according to our own perspectives. What we need to start doing is to include the perspectives of the people who don't feel like they belong within our circle of safety. When we start listening to them, when we start widening our circle of safety, when these people start feeling like they are included, diversity is a fact. We can see that it exists, But inclusion is a practice. It's a choice that we must make to make sure that they are taking an active role in what laws look like and what systems look like. Perfect example here in Canada. When COVID hit the world with a new pandemic, what did we do? The Canadian government was probably one of the best response in terms of our global pandemic responses. However, we talk about this being a country predominantly for English and French communication. So daily communication has been to reach out to communities in English and French. It's a great effort, but it's not enough. There are so many communities that don't speak English or French, and they are out in the fringes. They don't know how to access services. They don't know what to do. And in a time when people are physically distancing and socially isolating, who do they go to for help? What door do they knock on? What phone do they pick up and call? So you can see that these barriers aren't there because we have bad intentions. They're not there because we want them to be there. Sometimes even with the best of intentions, these barriers exist because we haven't the foresight to look ahead and to think there are people that are going to be excluded. We need to make sure and be proactive and not reactive, whether it's to a pandemic, whether it's a new law. So when we say that there's so much that we can still do when it comes to racism, you better believe it, there's so much that we can do. But it's about listening to the people who are consistently and constantly on the outside, because if you and I continue to write the laws, if you and I continue to build the systems and the structures that help our countries move forward, what we're going to see is people of color, people of different religions, different sexual orientations, people that don't generally feel like they belong in our communities and in our societies, continue to feel that they're excluded. We need to include them in the conversations. We need to listen to them. The next time that we're enacting laws, the next time that we're talking about diversity, the next time that we're practicing inclusion, they need to be part of our conversations. Conversations need to make sure to include people in their language and through their perspective, so that it's not just you and I. This is a difficult message, and when we look at what's happening right now in the United States, and when people are saying, I'm tired of being tired, because silence is not a choice for us. We have to make an active process moving forward. We have to be voicing up and speaking out and saying that we not only condemn what is happening, but we are going to be part of the solution. We are going to act, and we're not going to be complicit in what's being acted upon the victims themselves. So you and I have a choice. Where do we stand? Do we stand with the victims and take some proactive measures so that we can include them in our circle of safety? Or do we idly stand by while they continue to get butchered, their rights taken away, murdered, their lives just gone before our eyes? People watched George Floyd die right in front of them. For 10 minutes, Americans sat and watched a murder happen. And they could not do anything, because the fear is if I stood up, if I did anything, I'd be next. We need to make sure that we create psychological safety structures so that people feel that they can speak up, they can voice up, that you and I don't have to be afraid to say that this is wrong, we need to make it right. So, racism, you're either acting or you're acted upon. You're either a victim or you're complicit in carrying out the action of those who are practicing racism. That's the first thing. The second thing is we're talking about racism as it pertains to North America, Europe, Canada. This is our immediate focus, because this is where we're seeing in middle class, upper class societies where it's always the immigrants, or it's always the people of color, or it's always the indigenous communities, it's always people who profess a different creed or a different sexual orientation. They are not allowed to be part of our circle of safety. We need to include them in the conversation. Thank you.